Lila Moore lived where nothing much ever happened, a tidy townhouse on the edge of town, a morning shift at the bank, and a habit of watering geraniums on her tiny front porch. People called her polite, reliable, the sort of neighbor who returned borrowed sugar with a smile. They didn't know about the ledger she kept tucked beneath a false bottom in her kitchen drawer, a neat column of names, numbers, and quiet grudges. 3 years earlier, Lila had married well and lost worse. Her husband's investments had evaporated overnight, and the bank's helpful advisors had steered them into a bundle of bad loans. When her husband disappeared into long nights and late apologies, Lila learned to keep the house running on patience and a loan officer's promises. The bank, the same building where she now scanned deposits and counted coins, never noticed the small ways it had failed her. Soon she began to notice the small ways she could repay the ledger. She didn't become a criminal in a single dramatic moment. It was a calculation carried out in patient, domestic steps. Starting small, she noticed how customers left deposit slips unguarded, how tellers slid bags across counters when managers weren't looking, how weekend vault access was handled with sleepy trust. Lila began to collect details, names, pin patterns, who always chewed gum during audits. Her ledger filled with patterns, not just people. The plan she built was meticulous and humane in its logic. Lila would not hurt people who couldn't afford to lose. She targeted only the bank's quiet predators, high rollers who laundered money through shell accounts, executives who siphoned client funds into offshore hedges, and the one advisor who still came into the break room boasting about exploiting loopholes. For each target, she found a weakness: an expired passport, a lax audit, a single unencrypted laptop, and she exploited it like a surgeon, precise and antiseptic. Her method was social engineering: a sympathetic ear, a loan application typed just so, a late-night password reset requested with the candor of a colleague. When she needed access to a secure file she didn't hack, she leaned on human courtesy. "Can you do me a favor?" she'd ask, and the favor would be granted because no one suspected Lila Moore of anything more dangerous than thrift store curtains. Money she redirected disappeared into anonymous accounts tied to charities, to families who'd lost everything after predatory loans, to small businesses on the brink. Lila rationalized each transfer as correction, a gentle balancing of scales tipped by greed. She kept the ledger to remind herself who deserved what. The people who benefited never knew they'd been saved by the quiet woman who folded checks while humming hymns to herself. All secrets have edges. One summer afternoon, an audit team arrived, not by accident, but because the advisor she'd exposed had finally noticed a missing sum and decided to trace it. Lila felt the shift before the alarms went off. A new badge scanned in the lobby, a face she hadn't memorized, a manager's footsteps faster than usual. She moved faster than usual too. In a day of ordinary motions, she burned the final pages of the ledger and slipped the ash into the compost bin under her geraniums. They never arrested Lila. She was a helpful witness, tearful and apologetic about irregularities she'd discovered, and her calm testimony visited suspicion elsewhere. The audit found accounting errors and poor oversight, and inside the report Lila's name appeared only once, as a concerned employee. Outside the bank, she cleared out her desk, one box of mementos and a resignation letter folded like a small, polite letter of departure. Lila left town 2 weeks later with a suitcase and a different name. The geraniums stayed behind, tended by a neighbor who had always liked her. People said Lila had moved for a fresh start. Some said she'd been offered a job elsewhere. Only the compost bin knew the truth. A tiny ash, a circle of forgiveness buried beneath dead coffee grounds and the smell of earth. She never stopped being quiet. But sometimes, on an unfamiliar street, she would sit at a diner booth and listen to people talk about losses and loans and small cruelties. And she would fold the napkin politely, tuck another ledger into a different drawer, and keep watch, not for profit, but for balance. Please subscribe.